I'm Owen, 38 male. I'm an architect living in the city in a loft apartment that I designed myself. It's my sanctuary, a quiet place of clean lines and organized calm. My life is structured just like my buildings. I have my work, my small circle of friends, and my beach house, the one tangible result of a decade of sacrificing weekends and holidays. That beach house wasn't just a property, it was my escape, the place I went to decompress and hear myself think. It was supposed to be the one place in my life free from chaos and drama. But my family found a way to drag their special brand of chaos right through the front door, leaving behind a disaster that would force me to redesign not just a house, but my entire relationship with them. Before this story unfolds, I'd love to connect with you. Please let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is in your corner of the world. It's amazing to see how far these stories can travel. It all started, as these things so often do, with a phone call from my mother, Eleanor. Her voice had that specific tone it gets when she's about to ask for something on behalf of my sister, Chloe. It's a gentle, probing tone, one that tries to sound casual but is loaded with the expectation of my compliance. I was in the middle of reviewing blueprints for a new commercial complex, the light from my monitor casting long shadows across my desk. I almost let it go to voicemail, but the nagging feeling that ignoring it would only lead to a more intense follow-up call made me sigh and pick up. "Hey, Mom, everything okay?" "Oh, and honey, of course," she began, her voice a little too bright. "I was just thinking about you, and Chloe was just saying the other day how she can't remember the last time the whole family had a proper vacation together." I leaned back in my chair, pinching the bridge of my nose. I knew exactly where this was going. The family hadn't had a proper vacation together in years because every attempt ended in some kind of argument, usually instigated by Chloe's sense of entitlement and her husband Todd's condescending attitude. My beach house was my refuge from that very thing. "That's nice," I said, keeping my tone neutral. "The city is pretty hot this time of year. A getaway sounds like a good idea for them." I was trying to steer the conversation to suggest that they could book a hotel or a rental somewhere, but my mother was a master of ignoring subtle hints. "Well, that's just it," she said, her voice now shifting into the favor gear. "Chloe and Todd are a little tight on cash right now. You know how volatile his work is. And with the two kids, booking a place by the ocean is just so expensive." She was wondering, and it was just a thought, dear, if they could maybe use your beach house for a week, just to give the kids a chance to play in the sand. I felt an immediate visceral knot tighten in my stomach. My beach house. The one I'd poured my savings into, the one I'd spent countless weekends renovating with my own hands. I designed the deck, laid the reclaimed hardwood floors, and chosen every single piece of furniture. It was a reflection of me, calm, orderly, and meticulously cared for. The thought of Chloe, Todd, and their two notoriously destructive children let loose in my sanctuary was horrifying. Chloe treated borrowed things like they were disposable. I still remembered the custom-made suit jacket she'd borrowed from me for a themed party and returned with a cigarette burn and a shrug. "It was an accident, oh what's the big deal," she'd said, as if a $1,500 jacket was nothing. "Mom, I don't know," I started, trying to find a polite way to say absolutely not. "I have a lot of my personal things there and I have some strict rules about the place. No pets, no smoking inside." "Oh, of course, dear," my mother interrupted, sensing my hesitation and moving to counter it. "Chloe promised they would be on their best behavior. She knows how much that house means to you. She said they would treat it like a palace. And it would mean so much to me, Owen, to know my grandchildren are getting a real summer memory." The emotional blackmail was subtle but effective. She was framing my refusal not as a reasonable boundary, but as me depriving her grandchildren of happiness. It was a classic Aliner move: avoid direct conflict by making me the bad guy if I said no. I was silent for a long moment, weighing my options. If I said no, I would face weeks of guilt trips from my mother and passive-aggressive comments from Chloe. They would paint me as the selfish, unfamily-oriented son who hoarded his success. If I said yes, I would spend the entire week in a state of high anxiety, picturing scratched floors and stained upholstery. I thought about laying down strict conditions, but I knew Chloe. Rules were merely suggestions to her. She lived in a world where consequences were for other people. Her husband, Todd, was even worse. He had tea. His smug air about him, constantly talking about his crypto investments as if he were a Wall Street genius, yet he never seemed to have any actual money. He was the kind of guy who would use a designer coaster as a frisbee and then lecture you on the decentralized future of currency. My Aunt Sarah, my late father's sister, had always warned me about Chloe's borrowing. "Owen," she'd said to me once over coffee, "your heart is in the right place, but your sister sees kindness as a weakness to be exploited. Remember that." Sarah was the only one in the family who saw Chloe for who she really was. My mother was blinded by a desperate need for family harmony, even if it was completely artificial. Against my better judgment, and largely because I didn't want the headache of the inevitable fallout, I caved. "Okay, Mom," I said, the words feeling like ash in my mouth. "1 week, but you have to make it clear to her. They need to be careful, seriously." "Oh, thank you, Owen. You're a wonderful son," she gushed, the relief in her voice palpable. "I'll tell her, she'll be so thrilled you won't regret this." The call ended and I sat in the silence of my office, a profound sense of dread washing over me. I already regretted it. The next day I called Chloe directly to go over the ground rules. Her response was flippant and dismissive. Yeah, oh, I get it. Don't burn the place down. We're just going to chill on the beach. What's the worst that could happen?" She said, the sound of one of her kids screaming in the background. "I'm serious, Chloe. That place is my biggest investment. You have to leave it exactly as you found it. I'm trusting you." "Relax," she laughed. "You worry too much. It'll be fine. We'll even bring you back a souvenir." I hung up feeling anything but relaxed. I spent the next few hours drafting a meticulous email with a checklist for leaving the house. How to operate the storm shutters where the main water shutoff was, a reminder to empty the fridge, and a clear instruction to run the dishwasher and strip the beds before they left. I knew she'd probably delete it without reading, but at least I had a paper trail. I was trying to manage the impending disaster, to put some of my architectural order onto Chloe's chaotic existence. It was a fool's errand. As I sent the email, I had a sinking feeling that I wasn't just lending out a house. I was setting the stage for a catastrophe. The Monday Chloe and her family were supposed to arrive, she sent me a single text. "Made it, places awesome, THX bro." It was accompanied by a blurry photo of the kids running towards the ocean. For a moment, a tiny part of me felt a flicker of hope. Maybe this time would be different. Maybe the sheer beauty and tranquility of the place would inspire some respect in her. Maybe she was finally growing up. That hope lasted for about 24 hours. After that initial text, there was nothing. Complete radio silence. At first, I told myself it was a good thing. They were probably so busy having fun, building sandcastles and swimming, that they didn't have time to be on their phones. "No news is good news," I muttered to myself as I tried to focus on a challenging design problem at work. But my focus was shot. I found myself checking my phone constantly, my thumb hovering over her contact, fighting the urge to send a just checking in text. I knew that would only be met with annoyance. I'd be the overbearing brother, the worrier who couldn't let his family enjoy a simple vacation. By Wednesday, the anxiety was a low hum beneath the surface of my day. I tried calling her in the evening, thinking it was a reasonable time. The phone rang and rang before finally going to voicemail. "Hey Chloe, it's Owen. Just wanted to see how you guys are settling in. Hope you're having a great time. Give me a call when you get a chance." The call was never returned. I then tried texting Todd. My text was simple. "Hey Todd, hope you guys are enjoying the beach. Just making sure everything is okay with the house." An hour later, I got a one-word reply, "Yep." The dismissiveness was so characteristic of him that it was almost comical. Here I was, a nervous wreck about my property, and he couldn't be bothered to type a full sentence. It felt like he was intentionally trying to wind me up. The silence felt ominous. It wasn't the peaceful silence of a family enjoying a quiet retreat. It felt like the loaded silence of something being hidden. My mind started to conjure up worst-case scenarios. Had they clogged the septic system? Did one of the kids draw on the walls? Did Todd try to day trade on my computer and download a virus? I called my mom on Thursday, hoping she'd heard from them. "Oh, I'm sure they're fine, honey," she said in her usual placating tone. "Chloe sent me a picture of the grandkids with ice cream. They look so happy. It's wonderful that you did this for them." She was completely missing the point. My concern wasn't about their happiness, it was about the state of my property. It felt like no one in my family understood the concept of respecting someone else's belongings. To them, my house was just a free hotel, a commodity to be used. The fact that I had worked incredibly hard to afford and maintain it didn't seem to register. On Friday, 2 days before they were scheduled to leave, my anxiety reached its peak. I decided to check the security camera I had installed at the front door. I rarely looked at it, as I valued my own privacy and that of any guests, but this felt like an emergency. I opened the app, my heart pounding, and clicked on the live feed. The image was grainy, but I could see the driveway. And parked in my driveway, next to Todd's oversized SUV, was another car I didn't recognize. A beat-up sedan with a dent in the passenger side door. Who else was there? I had explicitly told Chloe no extra guests. My house was on a delicate septic system designed for a maximum of 4 people, not a party. I scrolled back through the recorded clips from the past few days. My stomach dropped. There were clips of people I'd never seen before coming and going. A group of 4 adults had arrived on Wednesday afternoon carrying coolers and beach chairs. They looked like they were settling in for the long haul. Chloe hadn't just brought her family, she had invited her friends. Anger, hot and sharp, surged through me. This wasn't just a simple rule break, it was a profound betrayal of my trust. She had lied to me knowing full well I would have said no. She had taken my kindness and used it to throw a party for her friends at my expense. I immediately called her again. This time she picked up on the second ring, her voice loud and slurred over the sound of music and laughter. "Owen, hey, what's up? Chloe, who else is at the house?" I demanded, my voice tight. There was a pause. "What are you talking about?" she said, her tone suddenly defensive. "Just a couple of friends from Todd's work stopped by. It's no big deal." "It is a big deal," I shot back, my voice rising. "I told you no guests. The septic system can't handle that many people, Chloe. You can't just invite a crowd to my house." "Oh my God, relax," she slurred, her voice dripping with scorn. "It's a house, not a museum. We're being careful. You need to stop spying on us and let us have some fun. We're leaving on Sunday like we promised." Then, before I could say another word, she hung up on me. I stood there in my apartment, phone in hand, shaking with rage. The audacity was breathtaking. She wasn't sorry, she was angry that she'd been caught. She had turned my generosity into an opportunity to be reckless and then had the nerve to act like I was the one in the wrong for being concerned. The week of silence was broken, and in its place was a loud, ugly confirmation of all my worst fears. I knew with a certainty that chilled me to the bone that when I got to the house on Sunday after they left, I was not going to like what I found. The rest of the weekend was agony. I couldn't work, I couldn't relax. I just waited, counting down the hours until I could drive down there and see the extent of the damage for myself. I drove the 2 hours to the coast on Sunday afternoon, giving them what I thought was ample time to clean up and clear out. My stomach was in a permanent knot, a feeling I hadn't been able to shake since the phone call with Chloe. I tried to be optimistic. Maybe her version of a couple of friends was an exaggeration. Maybe her slurred speech was just from one glass of wine. Maybe, just maybe, my anger had blown things out of proportion. But the closer I got to the house, the more that fragile optimism evaporated, replaced by a cold, hard dread. I turned onto the gravel lane that led to my property, and the first sign of trouble was the overflowing garbage and recycling bins at the end of the driveway. They were supposed to be taken out on Friday morning. Clearly, they hadn't been. Bags of trash were piled up next to them, torn open, with seagulls feasting on the contents. I pulled into the driveway and my heart sank. The lawn, which I kept neatly manicured, had tire tracks gouged into it where someone had clearly parked on the grass. An empty pizza box was lying near the front steps, and a child's plastic shovel was abandoned in the middle of the flower bed, crushing my freshly planted hydrangeas. I took a deep breath and used my key to open the front door. The first thing that hit me was the smell. It was a stale, cloying mix of cigarette smoke, cheap beer, and something vaguely like burnt plastic. I had a strict no-smoking rule. The smell was a punch to the gut. I stepped inside and flicked on the lights, and then I just stood there in the entryway, completely numb. The place was a disaster zone. It wasn't just messy, it was desecrated. In the living room, my white linen sofa had a large, dark red stain splashed across the cushions, W. Ini, most likely. The custom-made coffee table I had designed from a single piece of reclaimed maple had deep white rings on it where wet glasses had been left to sit for days. Someone had tried to carve their initials into the corner. A lamp was knocked over, the shade bent and crumpled. The hardwood floors were sticky and covered in sand and crumbs. But that was just the beginning. I walked into the kitchen and it was even worse. The sink was piled high with dirty dishes caked with dried food. The dishwasher, which I had specifically instructed them to run, was empty. The stainless steel fridge had several dents in the door and the handle was loose. On the granite countertop was a deep black scorch mark next to the stove, as if someone had placed a hot pan directly onto the stone. My set of expensive chef's knives was missing 2 knives. I moved through the rest of the house like a ghost, cataloging the destruction. In the master bedroom, my bed was unmade, the sheets stained with what looked like chocolate and grease. A cigarette had been stubbed out on the nightstand, leaving a permanent burn on the wood. In the bathroom, the shower curtain was torn from its rings and lying in the tub. There were towels, damp and smelling of mildew, strewn all over the floor. The guest room, where the kids must have stayed, had crayon drawings on one of the walls, a grotesque, childish mural in bright red and blue. I finally went out onto the back deck, the part of the house I was proudest of. I had built it myself, plank by plank. The cover of my expensive barbecue grill was missing, and the grill itself was filthy, coated in a thick layer of black grease. Worse, there were multiple cigarette burns on the deck railings, and one of the boards near the stairs was cracked completely through, as if someone heavy had jumped on it. I just stood on that deck looking out at the ocean, my hands trembling. This wasn't the result of a family having a fun week at the beach. This was the result of a week-long disrespectful party thrown by people who had zero regard for me or my property. They hadn't just been careless, they had been destructive. They had treated my sanctuary like a frat house. The list of rules, the checklist I had so carefully prepared, it had all been utterly ignored. It felt so personal. This wasn't just damage to a house, it was a message. The message was that I didn't matter, my hard work didn't matter, my feelings didn't matter. All that mattered was their fleeting, selfish pleasure. I spent the next hour walking through the house with my phone, methodically taking pictures and videos of everything. Every stain, every scratch, every burn mark, every broken item. I documented it all, my initial shock slowly hardening into a cold, quiet fury. This wasn't something a simple cleaning service could fix. The sofa was likely ruined. The coffee table and nightstand would need to be professionally refinished. The wall would have to be repainted. The scorch mark on the granite might be permanent. The deck board was a safety hazard and needed immediate replacement. I started doing a rough calculation in my head and the numbers were staggering. This was thousands of dollars in damage, thousands. I finally sat down on the one clean chair on the deck, the photos and videos saved on my phone. The sun was setting over the water, casting a beautiful orange and pink glow across the sky. It was a sight that usually filled me with peace. But tonight, all I felt was the cold, heavy weight of betrayal. I stared at the wreckage of my beautiful house, and the numbness began to fade, replaced by a steely, unfamiliar resolve. They were not going to get away with this. The drive back to the city was silent and grim. My mind was a whirlwind of anger and disbelief. By the time I walked into my apartment, the rage had solidified into a clear, sharp purpose. I wasn't just going to clean up their mess, I was going to hold them accountable, every last cent. The first thing I did was call Chloe. I didn't yell, I kept my voice perfectly level, almost eerily calm. "Chloe," I said when she answered, "I'm at the beach house." "Oh hey," she said, her voice a little too cheerful. "Did you see the seashell we left for you on the counter? The kids found it." The sheer triviality of her comment in the face of the carnage she'd left behind was staggering. "I saw it," I said, my voice like ice. "I also saw the wine stain on the sofa, the initials carved into the coffee table, the cigarette burns on the nightstand and the deck, the crayon on the wall, and the scorch mark on the granite countertop. Do you have anything to say about that?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Finally, she sighed, a sound of pure annoyance. "Oh my God, Owen, you are so dramatic, it's just a little mess. We were on vacation, we didn't have time for a deep clean." "A little mess," I repeated, my voice dangerously quiet. "Chloe, this is thousands of dollars in damages. The sofa is ruined, the furniture needs to be professionally repaired, the wall needs to be repainted. This isn't a mess, this is destruction." "Well, I don't know what to tell you," she said, her tone shifting from annoyed to defensive. "Things happen, kids will be kids, Todd's friends got a little rowdy. It's what renter's insurance is for, right? Just file a claim." The audacity of that statement, to so casually tell me to commit insurance fraud to cover for her recklessness, was the final straw. "This isn't a rental property, Chloe, it's my home, and you weren't renters, you were guests, you were family, I trusted you." "Well, maybe you shouldn't have," she snapped. "Maybe you should learn to loosen up, it's just stuff, Owen, you can buy more stuff, you have plenty of money." And then she hung up. I knew then that appealing to her sense of decency was pointless because she didn't have one. My next step was to get a professional assessment. I spent all of Monday on the phone. I called a disaster restoration company, a furniture refinisher, a painter, and a contractor to look at the deck. I arranged for them to meet me at the house the following weekend. The investigation had begun. While I waited, I decided to call the one person in my family I knew I could trust, Aunt Sarah. I told her everything, from the initial phone call with my mom to the discovery of the wreckage and the infuriating conversation with Chloe. She listened patiently, without interruption, letting me vent all my frustration. "I'm so sorry, Owen," she said when I finished, her voice full of genuine sympathy. "I warned you she hadn't changed, but I know how hard it is to say no to your mother." "What do I do, Sarah?" I asked, feeling exhausted. "Mom will just tell me to forgive and forget. She'll say family is more important than things." "Your mother enables her," Sarah said bluntly. "She always has. As for what you do, you document everything, you get professional quotes, and you send them the bill. Don't let them sweep this under the rug." Her validation was like a balm on a raw wound. It was a relief to know I wasn't crazy for being this angry. That weekend, I met the professionals at the beach house. The restoration expert walked through the property, his expression growing more grim with each room. He pointed out things I had missed, like the water damage on the bathroom floor from the torn shower curtain and the faint but unmistakable smell of smoke that had permeated the drywall. The furniture guy confirmed the coffee table and nightstand could be salvaged, but it would be expensive. The sofa, he said, was a total loss. The wine had soaked through the cushions and into the frame. The contractor inspected the cracked deck board and found two more that were unstable. The final quotes started rolling in by email a few days later. They were even worse than I had imagined. Professional deep cleaning and smoke remediation, $2,500. Sofa replacement like for like, $4,000. Furniture refinishing, $1,200. Repainting guest room and repairing drywall, $800. Deck repair, $1,500. Replacement of missing knives and other small items, $300. The grand total was a staggering $10,300. I compiled all the official quotes into a single detailed PDF, complete with the photos I had taken of the damage. I drafted a calm, formal email to Chloe and Todd with my mother CC'd. The email laid out the facts clearly and without emotion. It listed the damages, attached the professional estimates, and stated the total amount owed. I gave them 30 days to pay. "This is not about stuff," I wrote in the concluding paragraph. "This is about respect and accountability. You betrayed my trust and caused significant damage to my property. I expect you to take full responsibility and make this right." I hit send, my hand steady. There was no turning back now. The whispers would start soon. My mother would call, trying to broker a peace that would inevitably be at my expense. Chloe would paint me as the villain, but I had my receipts, both literal and figurative. The investigation was over. Now it was time to build my case. The response to my email was exactly what I expected. Within an hour, my phone was ringing. It was my mother, Alina. Her voice was strained, caught between placating me and defending Chloe. "Owen, I just saw your email," she began. $10,000, honey, that seems excessive. Are you sure it was that bad?" Chloe said it was just a little messy. "Mom, I sent you the pictures and the professional quotes," I said, my patience already wearing thin. "This isn't my opinion. This is the reality of the situation. They were negligent and destructive. But they don't have that kind of money, Owen, you know that," she pleaded. "Todd's investments haven't been doing well. This would ruin them. Can't you just let it go? For the sake of the family, we can all pitch in and help you clean up." "So I should be fine, entirely responsible for their actions?" I asked, incredulous. "They destroy my property, lie about it, and my punishment is to clean up their mess and absorb a $10,000 loss? How is that fair?" "It's not about fair, it's about family," she said, using her favorite line. "Sometimes the one who is in a better position has to be the bigger person." The conversation went in circles for another 10 minutes before I finally cut her off. "Mom, I love you, but I am not discussing this with you anymore. This is between me and Chloe and Todd. They are adults and they need to face the consequences of their actions. I am not letting this go." I ended the call, feeling a pang of guilt for being so firm with her, but I knew it was necessary. Her idea of keeping the peace was to sacrifice my well-being for Chloe's comfort. Chloe and Todd themselves didn't even bother to respond to my email. Their silence was their answer. They clearly believed that if they ignored the problem, it would simply go away. They were counting on my mother to wear me down, on my desire to avoid family drama to ultimately make me drop it. They had severely underestimated how far they had pushed me. For the next 2 weeks, a tense silence descended over the family. My mom left me a few tearful voicemails, which I didn't return. Chloe and Todd continued their radio silence. I knew they were banking on time to defuse the situation. That's when I realized a simple bill wasn't enough. They would never pay it. I needed leverage. I needed a consequence that they couldn't ignore. And then I remembered something my father had told me years ago, shortly before he passed away. We were sitting on the porch of this very same beach house, which was then just a rustic old cabin he had inherited from his parents. He was talking about his will and the arrangements he was making. He had a deep sense of fairness and a distrust of Chloe's budding sense of entitlement even back then. "Your sister, she takes things for granted," he'd said, looking out at the waves. "I'm leaving the cabin to you, Owen. You're the one with the steady head, the one who will care for it. But I'm putting something in the family trust for her and David. It's not a lot, but it's their inheritance. It's to be paid out when your mother passes." My father had set up a modest family trust, with the house kept separate as my inheritance and a cash fund to be divided between his other 2 children. My mother was the executor, but after her, the responsibility would fall to me and Aunt Sarah as co-executors. I had a copy of the trust documents filed away in my home office. A plan began to form in my mind, a plan that was methodical, legal, and inescapable. It was an architect's solution to a human problem. I pulled out the thick folder and spent an entire evening reading through the legal jargon. And there it was, a small but powerful section my father's lawyer must have recommended, Clause 7.4, Repayment of Familial Debts. The clause stated that if any beneficiary of the trust incurred a significant financial debt to another family member and refused to repay it in good faith, the co-executors, upon my mother's passing, had the authority to deduct that debt with interest from the beneficiary's share of the inheritance. It was designed to prevent exactly this kind of situation. Chloe had likely forgotten all about it, if she ever even knew it existed. To her, the inheritance was just free money she was entitled to somewhere down the road. She had no idea it could be touched. My plan was simple. I would pay for all the repairs myself, keeping every single invoice and receipt. I would create a perfect, undeniable paper trail. I would send Chloe and Todd one final demand for payment, this time via registered mail, making it official. When they inevitably ignored it, I would formally document their refusal. Then I would file it all away and wait. It was a long game, but it was the only game they couldn't win. They could ignore my calls, they could hang up on me, they could refuse to pay me back now, but they couldn't escape the legal framework of the trust. One day, when the time came to settle the family estate, my $10,300 plus years of accumulated interest would be the first thing deducted from her share. She wouldn't be able to throw a tantrum or rely on mom to smooth it over. It would be a simple, non-negotiable line item on a legal document. Her own irresponsibility would come back to bite her years in the future, long after she'd forgotten the details of that one destructive week. The thought filled me not with glee, but with a sense of calm, righteous justice. They wanted me to just forget about it. Oh, I would forget about it. I'd let it sit, quietly accruing value like the most patient and punishing investment I'd ever made. For the next 2 months, I executed my plan with quiet precision. I hired the contractors and paid for all the repairs out of my own pocket. The house was slowly, painstakingly restored. The walls were repainted, the furniture refinished, the deck repaired. I bought a new sofa, almost identical to the old one. With each check I wrote, I made a copy and filed it away in a folder labeled Chloe's debt. The final bill came to $10,450 after a few minor unforeseen costs. I sent the registered letter with the final, itemized invoice and a formal request for payment within 30 days. As expected, it was met with silence. The signed delivery receipt was all the confirmation I needed. My paper trail was complete. Life settled into a new, fractured normal. I stopped attending the Sunday family dinners my mother tried to host. My calls with her became infrequent and strained. She had tried a few more times to get me to build a bridge, but I refused. The bridge was burned down, Mom, I told her, and the person holding the matches wasn't me. The only family member I spoke to regularly was Aunt Sarah. She supported my decision completely. You're doing the right thing, Owen, she assured me. Accountability is not cruelty. The holidays approached, and with them came the inevitable pressure from my mother for a family gathering. She wanted a big Christmas dinner, a chance to heal the wounds and pretend everything was fine. I knew it was a setup, an ambush where I would be pressured to forgive Chloe in the spirit of the season. I initially planned to refuse, but Aunt Sarah gave me an interesting piece of advice. Go, she said, but don't go to reconcile. Go to make your position perfectly, publicly clear. Don't let them control the narrative. This is your chance to close the book on this chapter on your terms. So I agreed to go. I arrived at my mother's house on Christmas Eve, the last to get there. The moment I walked in, the forced cheerfulness was suffocating. Chloe and Todd were there with their kids, acting as if nothing had ever happened. Chloe gave me a breezy hey-oh as if we were the best of friends. Todd just gave me a smug little nod. My mother rushed over, her face a mask of desperate hope. The entire evening was a masterclass in avoidance. Everyone talked about the weather, about the kids' school plays, about anything and everything except the $10,000 elephant in the room. Chloe was particularly loud and performative, showing off pictures from her latest influencer collaboration with a local boutique. After dinner, as everyone was gathered in the living room with coffee and dessert, my mother made her move. "Isn't this lovely?" she said, beaming at everyone. "The whole family all together, it's all I've ever wanted. Now, Owen, Chloe, I think this has gone on long enough. Life is too short for grudges. Can't we just agree to let bygones be bygones and start the new year fresh?" All eyes turned to me. Chloe looked at me, a triumphant little smirk on her face. She thought she had won. She thought I would cave to the public pressure. I took a slow sip of my coffee, set the cup down deliberately on the coaster, and looked directly at her. "I agree, Mom. Life is too short," I began, my voice calm and measured, cutting through the tense silence. "It's too short to allow yourself to be disrespected by people who don't value you. It's too short to clean up other people's messes. It's too short to absorb the financial consequences of someone else's irresponsibility." Chloe's smirk vanished. Todd shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. "Owen, please," my mother whispered, her face pale. "I'm not here to argue," I continued, my gaze still locked on Chloe. "I'm here to provide a final update. As you know, Chloe, you and Todd left my beach house with over $10,000 in damages. I sent you a detailed invoice which you ignored. That's your choice. So I've made a choice of my own." I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a neatly folded envelope. I placed it on the coffee table. "This is a copy of all the receipts for the repairs, which I have paid for in full. It also includes a copy of the registered letter you chose not to answer. And finally, it includes a copy of Clause 7.4 of Dad's family trust." A flicker of confusion crossed Chloe's face. She didn't know what I was talking about. "The clause," I explained, "states that any outstanding financial debt owed by a beneficiary to another family member can be deducted from their inheritance, with interest. So you don't have to worry about paying me back now. The estate will handle it for you one day. Consider it a long-term payment plan. The matter is now, for all intents and purposes, closed. The silence in the room was absolute. Chloe's face went from confused to white with rage. Todd looked like he'd been slapped. My mother just stared, speechless. You what? Chloe finally sputtered. You're taking my inheritance, Dad's money. I'm not taking anything, I said calmly. I'm being reimbursed for the money you forced me to spend. Your choices have consequence. CES, Chloe, for once in your life you are going to be held accountable for them. She launched into a tirade, calling me a thief, a monster, saying I was tearing the family apart over a stupid house. I didn't engage, I just let her scream. When she finally ran out of breath, I stood up. I've said what I came to say, I told the room. Merry Christmas. I turned to my mother. I love you, Mom, I said softly. And then I walked out the door, leaving the wreckage of their fantasy world behind me. Walking out of my mother's house that Christmas Eve felt like stepping out of a high-pressure chamber. The cold night air was a relief, washing away the suffocating atmosphere of forced cheer and simmering resentment. I didn't feel triumphant or vengeful. I just felt free. I had stood up for myself, drawn a line in the sand not with anger but with cold, hard facts. I had taken control of the situation and refused to be the family doormat any longer. The drive home was quiet. My phone buzzed a few times, but I ignored it. I knew it would be my mother, either angry or pleading, and I wasn't ready to deal with either. The next morning, I got a call from Aunt Sarah. I heard what happened, she said. Your mother called me very upset. She said you ruined Christmas. Did I? I asked, a genuine question. No, Sarah replied firmly. You revealed the truth. They ruined Christmas the moment they decided their vacation was more important than your property and your trust. You just held up a mirror. I'm proud of you, Owen. Her words meant more to me than she could ever know. In the weeks that followed, the fallout was significant. Chloe and Todd cut off all contact. They blocked my number and scrubbed any mention of me from their social media. To their circle of friends, I'm sure I was painted as the cold, money-obsessed villain who stole his own sister's inheritance over a few broken items. I was okay with that. The people who mattered knew the truth. My relationship with my mother was the most difficult casualty. It took months for us to find a new footing. Our conversations were stilted at first. She couldn't understand why I had to be so formal and legal about it. I tried to explain that her method of rug sweeping had enabled Chloe's behavior for decades. By forcing the issue, I wasn't just recouping a financial loss. I was trying to break a toxic family dynamic. Slowly, very slowly, she began to understand. She never fully admitted I was right, but she stopped pressuring me to reconcile with Chloe. She started having separate relationships with her children, which was healthier for everyone. Our Sunday dinners never returned to the way they were, but we started meeting for lunch, just the two of us, and building a more honest, albeit more complicated, relationship. As for the beach house, it became my sanctuary again. I spent a lot of time there that next year, not just relaxing but reinforcing it, both literally and figuratively. I installed a new, more advanced security system. I drafted a formal guest policy document that anyone who stayed there, friends or the few family members I still trusted, had to sign. It felt a little formal, but it was a necessary boundary. The house itself felt different. It no longer felt fragile. It had been damaged and restored, and in the process, it had become stronger, much like me. A few years have passed since that Christmas. I see my mom regularly. I have a wonderful relationship with Aunt Sarah. I haven't spoken to Chloe or Todd since that night, and I feel no sense of loss over it. Sometimes I hear things through the family grapevine. Todd's crypto ventures apparently imploded, and they had to sell their house and move into a small rental. Chloe's influencer career never took off. I take no pleasure in their struggles, but I do feel a quiet sense of validation. Their choices led them to where they are, just as mine have led me to where I am. The folder labeled Chloe's Debt sits in the back of my filing cabinet. Every year on January 1st, I add a small, legally appropriate amount of interest to the total and print out a new cover sheet. It's a quiet, personal ritual. It's my reminder that respect isn't given, it's earned. And when it's not given, you have to build a foundation strong enough to withstand the damage and a structure of accountability that no one can tear down. The beach house stands as a testament to that. It's more than just a building of wood and glass. It's a symbol of my own reconstruction. It's the place I learned that sometimes the most important thing an architect can design is a boundary.